Welcome to Mind Yourself, a podcast sharing real life stories from real people, alongside conversations about mental health and emotional well-being. Listener discretion is advised, as this episode may include themes some listeners may find distressing. Wherever you're joining us from, whether you're walking, driving, or taking a quiet moment for yourself, you're very welcome here. Let's get started. So today we're talking to Andrea O'Grady. Now, Andrea, you are a wellness coach, you're a Pilates teacher, and you are a neuromuscular physical therapist, among other things. And today you're here in the wellness coach role. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Hi, Helen. Thanks for having me. I suppose the work that I do is all around holistic well-being. And from a very young age, I've always been really interested in people and their behaviour. And I suppose I'm attracted to things that are energetic. And that's been a thread throughout my whole life. I played basketball. I got injured. I was interested in healing from injury. And, you know, you've listed the things that I do there, and wellness coach being my primary role. And it's not just one thing that can make us unwell. That's what I've learned as I've gone along. I've worked in corporate. I've worked for myself as self-employed for 15 years. And the core of what I do is helping people recover from what affects them in life. So it could be physical pain. But what I noticed was there was a thread of people coming in physical pain to the clinic. And they were in emotional pain too. They were in a lot of emotional pain, recurrent back pain, unexplained neck, shoulder pain, and injuries that just didn't get better without a reason. You know, they weren't running, they weren't athletes. And throughout the course of conversation, people would talk about the struggles that they had in work, the challenges that they had in their home life, their kids. I mean, you get to know people when they come in and talk to you, and they come in for one thing and then over sessions they reveal. So that's how I ended up in the coaching role. And it really is, I think, my purpose. I think it's why I'm here. And I've been in those places. I've been in dark places in my life. And I have really struggled. And I've always had difficulty asking for help. I've always really struggled with not being strong and being able to figure it out on my own, if that makes sense.
And that's one of the misconceptions that you talk about, Andrea, isn't it? That we can look well, but that doesn't mean that we feel well.
Yeah.
And you have your own experience of that.
And to be blunt, there's this performance piece, and I think a lot of people suffer from it. And it's that, you know, put the good side out, you know, put your best out. And I think in today's age, in the age of Instagram and social media and AI and all of that, we're always on, we're always watching. There's nearly like a hypervigilance being bred into us through screens, that we have to look and perform a certain way. And in our roles as humans, particularly women, as mothers, you know, in the workplace, there's a mask that we put on ourselves, and we're performing rather than living wellness. And that's what I'm interested in when people come in with a particular challenge or wanting to get from A to B with a particular goal in their well-being, whether it's physical or mental. There's always other stuff going on underneath. And that's the bit I'm interested in, getting in there and seeing, well, where is all this coming from?
And do you have your own experience of that, where you feel maybe that you were masking, you know, putting your face on, pretending to be okay to the world when really you weren't?
Yeah, I could give a few examples if I'm honest. I think, you know, I've had really tough things happen, and none of us escape from that, do we? You know, like none. You know, the older I get and the more experienced life, it's like nobody escapes. I mean, we expect things to go along in this linear plane, and it just isn't. You know, going back to my childhood, I lost my dad when I was 9 years of age. He died from lung cancer, and I think, and I know, that's when I changed. So I became very aware and very vigilant about danger. And my role in my family, I was the youngest of 8 and still am. Everybody's still here. But that piece around if something's going wrong or somebody's unhappy or unwell, I am the good girl who'll make it better. And that fixing piece, that making sure everybody's okay. So what happened for me was this idea that I have to show that I'm okay. I have to be the strong one and not be upset or angry, because then everyone else will be all right. Everyone will be okay. And that's a thread that then has followed me through my work. I'm working in corporate, experiencing burnout, not asking for help when I was struggling after losing my mother. I lost my mum when I was 30, and in a very sort of sudden traumatic way, and she hadn't been well for a couple of years, but it was like the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and I was 9 years old again. And again at work, you had to perform, you had to show up, and I was working in a culture that the pressure was to perform and you were only as good as your last sale. I was working in buying and product development, and it was a dog-eat-dog situation. And, forcing to show up, smile, everything's fine. That image of a woman in a kitchen, it's a 1950s picture of a housewife in a kitchen looking perfect, and the frying pan's on fire and the thing says, I'm fine, over the caption. That's the way I felt going into work every day. That Sunday afternoon, like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, fear that would come in, and that churning in the stomach, that, anticipation, and the whole way to work feeling queasy and sick. And eventually it just wore me down, and I completely burnt out.
And Andrea, this masking or being the fixer that you mentioned, what effect do you think that has on mental health?
It just erodes it. My personal experience was that it eroded my sense of self. I became a person who was compliant and wanted to fit in and be accepted by people. So therefore, how am I meeting my own needs? So if I'm unhappy with something, if I want to say no, or if I was angry, I didn't present that way. That was pushed down. That was pushed right down, because conflict and avoiding it was my number one.
Was your strategy?
That was the strategy. And, subsequent years, I got married and had a gorgeous son called Jack. And, Jack is 16 now. But in the early years, he really struggled. He struggled when he went into primary school. And this gorgeous boy became a different person because he couldn't cope in school. And there was labels thrown around like, bold, naughty, maybe should have kept him off another year, he wasn't ready. And of course I internalised all this as I'm a bad parent, I'm not good enough, that perfection piece, and I had this wild expectation, you get married and you have a child and everything's going to be fabulous and easy, and nobody really tells you the truth of what's going to happen.
It sounds like it was threatening your sense of safety that you've created, whereby if other people are okay, then you're okay. So when your child wasn't okay, it threatened you.
Threatened me. But then what I realised was I was saying, actually, there's something going on here for him. There's something that we don't have an explanation for. There's, and I was looking up, he had sensory food issues. He couldn't cope with noise. He couldn't cope with big crowds. There's so many different challenges for him. And I was like, there's something else going on. And because I was starting to tune into that and I was looking at ADHD, autism, I love research. I love delving into topics. And I was told time and time again I was wrong, and that I was told by a nurse that I was a neurotic parent. I was told it's just a phase. He's teething. It's this, it's that. And I mean, he would have had teeth down his back if, you know, if it was just teething all the time. There was something else going on. So school revealed that there was really an issue, you know. He was fine at home, but when he went to school, you know, he really had meltdowns, you know, stopped talking, selective mutism. He would just shut down. He would hide in toilets, under tables. And I was like, this is actually a cry for help. There's something going on here. So we pursued assessment privately because the waiting list was so long with the HSE. And within it took a few goes to get him to cooperate, and within 5-6 weeks of a few attempts, we had a diagnosis of autism. And it was grief and relief. You know, it was such a relief to know my gut was right, that, you know, and then there was this grief that it's like, oh my God, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. What the hell am I going to do now? What are we going to do, myself and my husband, you know? But I think that was another rug pulling moment. That was, it's like, you know, something needs to change here. But I couldn't control the situation. I was resisting all this all of the time and holding on so tightly to the way I wanted things to be. And this mask of perfection, this mask of I'm doing okay. Like, all my family always thought, you always have it all together. And that was the beginning of the falling apart, that real falling apart, and going into a very dark place with my own mental health. But I'm reminded of, you know, the Japanese art of kintsugi, where, you know, things break apart and are mended with gold. And that had to happen in order for me to see that I needed to change the way I was approaching the situation. And that led me down to nervous system work and reading about the vagus nerve and how, when we get out of our head and into our body, that's what my child needed. I needed to meet him where he was in his nervous system. And I was joining in the meltdowns with him. I was joining in all of that piece. And we were, this implosion, you know. And then when I started to regulate myself and learn how to breathe and pause and slow down to see what was going on for me, I was able to meet him better where he was, because I was meeting myself first. And I think that's the edge where the chaos meets the calm. And that's the piece where we can really begin to understand ourselves, when we get out of the mind and into the body-based stuff. Because I saw that work for him and for myself. And it's actually really exciting, but it's very, very difficult to access that on your own. And sometimes you just need a bit of support.
So your parenting of Jack has taught you a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
Sounds like resilience and compassion.
Yeah.
In what way, in terms of your compassion for Jack and everything you learned about yourself, and through Jack, how are you able to bring that to the people who come to you for wellness coaching?
Yes, it's a really interesting question. I think the biggest thing is to have compassion, and just meet a person where they are. I remember a psychologist saying to me, you have to parent the child you have. And it was the best advice I ever got. And you have to parent yourself like you are. And I felt on this journey, not that I had to reparent myself because my parents weren't amazing people. They were fabulous and amazing parents, and they gave me so much love and sense of security. But it's the role that I adopted for myself because of loss and grief, that I had to reparent that piece of myself. And that space where we can meet ourselves and meet those parts of us that those needs aren't being met or haven't been met. That's a strategy and a coping strategy that we develop over our life. But as adults, we don't necessarily need to continue in those patterns of thinking or behaviour. And that's the space. So to have compassion for yourself, compassion for the person in front of me, and to really listen to, the identity piece, that self-esteem piece, the conditioning, and then the behaviours that somebody is living, really. And sometimes it's on autopilot, and I've done it myself, and I still do. Have these blind spots, and I'm in autopilot saying, oh my God, I need to be practicing what I'm preaching here. I actually need to go back to the foundations for myself and look after myself first.
And how do you mentor or coach somebody who presents with, say, good girl tendencies or people pleasing or masking? How do you work with somebody who's struggling to put their own needs first?
One of the core competencies with the Coaching Federation is really about active listening is the first piece, and it's to really listen. And very often it's to listen to what's not being said, that space in between the words. And the greatest tool is to reflect back. When a person hears their own voice speaking out, whatever challenge they're meeting in their life or their situation, and when you're really listening, you can reflect back with curiosity, or to really shine a light on something that there's pattern in their thinking. It's like, I'm not good enough, or I'm only of value if I'm useful to other people. And that shows up pretty quickly when someone's talking about themselves, and some people struggle to do that. So it's to really listen first, and then to reflect and to ask open questions.
You spoke about your role in the corporate world, and it does seem that stress and burnout is on the rise. Yeah. What do you think would be the first signs for people to look out for that they were experiencing stress or burnout?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, there's behavioural piece first. I mean, for yourself, or if a colleague, if they're not quite themselves, somebody's just withdrawn, decision fatigue, that executive function piece, that piece where you used to be really quick at making decisions, and you're sort of stuck or procrastinating, scrolling incessantly, avoiding big tasks, irritability, lack of sleep, just a general agitation around things that used to come easier. And it's something that you rest, but it doesn't go away. It just keeps growing and keeps growing. And, rest is great and it gives us relief. But if you keep going back into the same system, if you're going back into work, and it's possibly environmental, it could be the people around you, it could be a toxic culture, it could be one of your team isn't pulling their weight and you're carrying all the load because you don't say no. It's not necessarily that there's something wrong in you to be fixed, it's the system that needs to change. But the rest doesn't fix that, because you're taking the break and you're going back into the same scenario every single time.
Yeah. And if the things that you're saying today are resonating with somebody, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, the quickest way is to find me on my website at thewellnessedge.ie.
Great. And you're here at Four Swans as
I'm
well?
here at Four Swans, and I love it. I love being here, and I love the work I do. And I to say to somebody, if anything does resonate, just take a pause and really reflect. I think self-reflection is that piece where it's like, am I performing? Am I just pretending everything's all right and pushing through? And there's times in our life where we do have to do that, right? We do have to push through, but it's when it's feel like it has to be every day, that maybe that's something to look at.
And just finally, Andrea, how do you mind yourself?
It's different now to the way it used to be. It used to be going to the gym and starving myself, and I all very focused on the outward piece. But now it's internal. It's slowing down. Meditation. I meditate in the morning and the evening for 10 minutes. Some people might disagree and say you probably need to meditate more, Andrea. But, you know, just having those quiet times. I find I like to switch off the screen and have quiet space. But the body-based practices that I have, Pilates, dancing. I love dancing, and even singing. I joined a choir last year, and it's just amazing for that voice, to find your own voice. So getting out of your head and into your body, and that's where I'm at my happiest.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Cheers.
That is it for today's episode of Mind Yourself. If something in this conversation has resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, because these are the conversations that matter. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast, a quick rating or review really helps us to reach more people. So until next time, mind yourself.